We're joined by Dr. John Paolo Rivera, a Senior Research Fellow. And thank you for joining us, Doctor.
Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Good morning, everyone.
Yes, thank you for
morning.
joining us here on News and Views. Welcome to the show. All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Doc?
Yeah, I can hear
okay.
you.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's start off. No, in this new 20% U.S. tariff, no, how does this really affect Philippine exports?
Well, the U.S. decision to impose a 20% tariff on Philippine goods is a significant setback, particularly for our exporters, especially those in the sectors of electronics, garments, and
Yeah.
agri-based products, which have a high volume of exports to the United States. And it actually raises the cost of Philippine goods in the U.S. market, and it actually threatens our competitiveness and potentially reducing our export earnings and job opportunities in key sectors, particularly those heavily participating in the export market.
Yeah, but di ba, mostly kasi yung in-export na ng Philippines, you mentioned electronics. Pag electronics,
Yes.
ang alam ko, Doc, no, not everything that we export are finished products, mostly components. Does this
Yeah.
affect then the finished product sa loob ng US? Kasi that's where they assemble it.
Well, it could, but that's why we're telling that the effect of the tariffs can be direct. It can also be indirect. Because, for example, we send the raw materials, for example, to Taiwan.
Yes.
And then Taiwan I believe Taiwan has a relatively higher, if I'm not mistaken, tariffs compared to the Philippines. So, the Taiwanese export firms would have to levy an additional cost so that they will not be the one to shoulder the full effect of the tariff.
But before related to that, no? So in essence, Doc, it could also benefit the Philippines. Like for example, we're the lowest among most of the Asian countries. So let's say Taiwan, hypothetically, instead of sila magdadaan sa States, pwede nila idaan sa atin, and therefore yung export products will get the rate from the Philippines?
That's possible, and because the Philippines can actually take advantage of this low tariff in order for us to remain competitive, not necessarily with the United States, but with our other trading partners.
That's right.
Well, we all know that officials are now headed to Washington, no, to try and convince the U.S. to lower the tariff. Is there any realistic leverage the Philippines can use in the possible ongoing trade talks with the United States?
Well, it depends because the fact that from 17% to 20%, despite the negotiations, it still happened. So it's actually a wait and see scenario. But then the Philippines could actually continue leveraging on the economic and historical ties that we have with the United States, that we remain to be an economic partner, a viable economic partner, and at the same time a diplomatic partner with the United States.
Pero sa forecast mo, Doc, ano yung nakikita mo kung sakasakali, pagbigyan tayo ng US, ilang percentage yung kaya nilang ibaba? Because nauna ng 17 tapos ngayon 20.
Well, perhaps given the current information that we have, given the current trends, the most optimistic would be to put back the Philippines at 17%.
17 pa rin. Okay.
Kasi Doc, if you take a look yung mga imports ng US that na sumisira sa local economy nila, mostly it's electronics. You also have vehicle production, no? Because you have areas in the US from Detroit to other areas na ang baba na ng economy ng paggagawa ng industry ng paggagawa ng cars, and the Philippines essentially is not a threat to those products. No? So do you think among Asian nations might be a negative, but we stand to gain the most if these tariffs hold?
Well, if the tariffs hold, the Philippines could remain to be competitive, provided that we also expand our trade with other economies, particularly with our neighboring economies and other free trade areas that we have, rather than really focusing on our market with the United States.
What usually, Doc, what field or what products do we ang highest export natin sa US?
Well, it would really include, number one, electronics, agricultural products, and textiles. So these are mostly raw materials and work in progress. That's why the effect of the Trump tariffs would most likely or largely be indirect. But then the effect of this on, for example, unemployment and on productivity in the Philippines would have to be felt by those working here in the Philippines.
Yun nga, I was gonna ask that, kasi nga the economists natin are really alarmed regarding this 20% tariff na will be imposed on August 1 by the US. Pero what are the specific effects on this on jobs, consumers, industries per se, Doc?
Well, at the onset, this Trump tariffs could actually lead to lower export revenues. And lower export revenues would result to reduced factory activity here in the Philippines. And then it would now result to job losses, even weaker investor confidence, especially among those enterprises or firms here in the Philippines that are serving the global supply chain. So for me, the first element or the first variable that would be affected here would be employment. Employment of those Filipinos working in export sector enterprises.
Oo. Sinasabi kasi nila talagang they're really alarmed with this imposition ng tariff because majority of our trade kasi talaga US. So ang sinasabi ng iba ng mga economists and other people na this is a big challenge pero parang kumbaga lesson learned from the Philippines to explore more areas, 'di ba? And magkaroon ng i-improve yung products and systems natin and to negotiate better trade deals. But where do we start, 'di ba? How do we start from that?
Well, again, given what's happening now, the immediate response that the Philippine government can do would continue the diplomatic engagement, high-level discussion with the US. Let's not surrender on that. And retaliation should never be part of the option because nobody wins in retaliation. But the most critical part here would be, and I would echo the findings of many other economists, let's emphasize on export diversification. Let's expand market access. And we have that. The Philippines is very active in many free trade areas, particularly the ASEAN Economic Community. The European Union trade agreements were part of the GSP Plus of the EU. And then we also have the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, and we can strengthen trade activities with Korea, China, Japan, Australia, even New Zealand, because we are a signatory to the RCEP. And by diversifying trade to our neighboring economies, we are actually protecting the Philippines from this kind of policy changes from the United States.
Pero Prof, Doc, you could see yung most of the stuff that we export, aside from mga bananas and agricultural products, you mentioned textiles, but in its raw form, tela. No? Do you think it's about high time that we explore the possibility of actually developing an industry that exports finished products naman? So para this time, di ba, may diversify also the kind of materials we export, diversify yung product list natin.
Well, that is a critical move for the Philippines, that it's high time, that rather than having bulk of our trade to be in raw materials and work in progress, finished product would be very valuable because it would now contribute greater to economic growth. And at the same time, we do not have to rely on just raw material exports. And then the demand, particularly of developing countries like in the EU, in the Middle East, in North Asia, in East Asia, their demand for our finished product would be good. And the value added of that production would be greater. And this will actually contribute to us speeding up our economic growth towards the upper middle income status.
Kasi Doc, karamihan nangyayari sa atin, it's a cycle. We export a finished product, the EU, some EU countries will pick it up, come up with a high-end, let's say a jacket, a t-shirt, and it's exported back to the Philippines. And we buy it at a triple, times 4, times 5 of its price. So it's a lugi tayo sa export-import cycle.
No, that's why the Philippines would have to strengthen our comparative advantage, particularly in the areas of production, distribution, logistics, even labor costs. The efficiency of Filipino labor, the quality of our finished products would have to be established so that instead of other countries putting more value added, the value added that Filipino work has put into a product would already be sufficient for world trade.
All right. sinasabi nila kasi, if you look at it on another perspective, ang Pilipinas naman ay isa sa mga mababang binigyan ng tariff imposition ng US. Pinakamababa Singapore, if I'm not mistaken, pangalawa tayo. And how should we take this? Dapat bang maging parang mas lax tayo on this na okay, mababa pa rin naman tayo sa ASEAN?
Actually, we should not. The Philippines should not rest its laurels. The fact that we are still classifying ourselves as those economies with a lower US tariff. But for example, let's compare it with Vietnam. No? Looking at the recent tariff table, I believe Vietnam is also being imposed a 20% tariff. Even if it is equal, we have to look at other aspects, like for example, logistics. No? Who is more advanced in terms of logistics, in terms of distribution, in terms of technological application to finished products, to work in progress. And if, suppose that the other economy is more advanced in that area, then they would have the comparative advantage. That even if we have the same tariff rate, business would go to them rather than us. That's why it's a call. It's a wake-up call for us to start investing more into our technology, into our production capacities, and of course, into our ease of doing business. So that business would go to the Philippines regardless of the small margins in tariff differential with respect to other countries.
Widen our options, ika nga. But,
exactly.
Oo, pero sabi nga nila, let's say for example, worst comes to worst, may implement na nga itong August 1 na 20%, sa August 1. When is the earliest the public might start feeling the effects of that tariff hike?
Well, the tariff hike we would not immediately feel the effects, but then we should be able to feel it in the coming few months or few quarters because of the import bills that we have, that these orders would have to be processed first, to be delivered first, and then the succeeding demand would have to be subjected to the tariff, which might take a few months.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you. I will keep in touch with you as this progresses. But in the meantime, thank you, Dr. John Paolo Rivera, Senior Research Fellow, Philippine Institute for Development Studies.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Maraming salamat po. Maraming salamat.